So, welcome back to my channel. For those of you who do not know, my name is Shiardia Garapi. You guys can call me Shishi. Today, we are working on sewing tools that work, and I'm going to show you scissors and other sharp objects. So today I'm going to show you all the different scissors and sharp tools that I have in my room and that I use on a regular basis, and kind of how I use them, so that you guys can get an idea what kind of scissors you really need and what kind of scissors maybe you don't. So let's get at it. Alright, so these are all the sharp tools that are scissors. I do have rotary cutters, which actually comes like so. And of course, I have blades. But we're going to start with these. Okay, so I always suggest with scissors you have one set at least for fabric and one set for paper. And labeling them in a way that you can tell which one's which is really important. I had paper written on here, but it has since worn away. But that's alright, I know that they are paper scissors, and usually I use them either for paper or cutting threads. Sometimes I use them to trim off little corners of fabric that I don't quite want, because they're sharp enough for that, but not really good for cutting good fabric. So if I want to cut good fabric, I use these scissors, or I use these scissors when I'm using scissors. We all know that I have a little bit of trouble with my wrists, so I tend to use the electric scissors. Now, to demonstrate, paper scissors usually aren't the sharpest, and they can be just a used tool. So they could be fabric scissors that have grown way too old to sharpen. And fabric scissors, they cut a little different. Fabric scissors are much better and sharp all the way to the tip, and are really able to cut fabric and make good, clean, straight cuts on fabric every time. The paper scissors are dull and will end up catching in lots of different places, which is why they're used for paper. Next up are these pinking scissors, which have little grooves cut out of the notches, and they cut and make little triangles that will definitely keep your edges from fraying, as well as make a nice finished edge. Usually used for decoration, I tend to use them on the insides of seams and on the edges of fabric that I don't particularly want to wash too many times. So the next ones are these little thread snips, which are generally the easiest ones to use. This pair I have for to-goes, of course. So they have a little cap that covers up my snip edges and makes it a nice little dull carry-on item, as well as a easy compartmentalized thing that you can put in your pouches with a little easy to hold handle that you can also clip keychains to if you want to be able to find it in the bottom of your sewing bag. These pair are slightly more expensive, and I tend to use them for thread and for the little cuts that inevitably happen at a sewing machine. They cut pretty well on small portions of fabric, but generally they're not really good for fabric over time. They become uncomfortable. They are not really meant for that, and as you can tell, I can use them upside down, right side up, doesn't matter, left hand, right hand, these are great. So, on to the weird sharp tools. This one is a cutter blade or an X-Acto. It is generally used for crafts, for paper, to make good, smooth, accurate cuts in particular designs, to go around pattern shapes. It's sometimes more helpful than not. This one's a little dull, as I've been using it for foam and for fiberboard. So the blade comes out fairly easily. You can rechange them. You can change them into other blades. I have a great variety of these, including some curved ones. And there is a flat, chisel-like looking one that I enjoy because it makes opening buttonholes so much easier. So when it comes to buttonholes, eyelets, other things that you have to open up the hole for, I would say this is your best bet. Meanwhile, my tool's being silly. This one's just a plain old Olfa X-Acto. This definitely comes in handy when you are cutting big portions or fiberboard or other kinds of things, because once you have some gravity to help you, it's a fairly sharp cut. Easy to cut down boards, easy to cut down in these particulars and make easy separators so that I can keep my patterns that I'm currently working on separated from other notes, and that stays on my desk fairly easily. Now, these next two scissors are generally used in applique and in quilting, so they're not standard. These ones are applique scissors. They have the special little disc that's kind of this half moon shape that allows you to get under fabric. So when you've got an applique on top of your fabric and you want to get under the edge of the fabric and very close to the thread stitching, this is way easier because it won't let you get so close. It lifts up that little edge of fabric so you don't have to try to get close. And as you can see, my stitches are super, super close to the edge now, and I'll be able to go over that with a little bit of an applique stitch, and I'll be able to make it disappear. These ones, as you can see, these little half moon shape on top, and that's where the cutting blade is. And that's so that you can go under the thread and get very close to the surface. And then you can cut the thread itself down close. Ooh, these need to sharpen. My poor scissors. My poor scissors need to sharpen. That's okay. So I'll show you again. These get under the fabric so you don't accidentally cut the fabric. And then it cuts the thread. But these ones are kind of dull. I might have to replace them. They're kind of hard to sharpen as they do have a kind of weird curve. And the blade itself is incredibly difficult to sharpen. So that's the blade, is that tiny little sliver there. They are very good for quilting and cutting those threads that are super close, but really I tend to use these scissors more often than I use these ones, and as you can tell, they're getting a little dull quite quickly. So even when they're just cutting thread, they're not exactly the most useful tool. So I generally don't use them, and I prefer the applique scissors. These ones, I say, if you are going to be sewing any kind of trim onto your fabric, get these. If you are making 18th century clothes and you are putting those trims super close or those laces on, this is your scissor. This will lift up the fabric and allow you to cut really close to your sewing line, whether it's a hand sewing line or a sewing machine line, and these are way more helpful. Now, as I showed you in the first episode, these are my favorite scissors, and they are electric scissors that I got from Amazon, and here I am. I'm going to fold up this set of fabric so that I have 8 layers of cotton here, and I'm going to give you a little show here. And just like that, I have a basically straight cut through 8 layers. And I mean, it is slightly off because I'm holding it in the air instead of really holding it down on the ground. See? Much more accurate when it's down on the ground. The thing about these that I guess I didn't really get to show anybody is that they are perfect for cutting around shapes. So if you have an oddball pattern piece and you need to cut angles. Now tell me that isn't accurate. I appreciate these because they make short work of all of my pattern cutting, and I don't feel nearly as tired because they aren't actually as heavy as some of the electric scissors that I have seen. They are also cordless, so that makes my life a little easier. And I really appreciate them for being able to cut because the weakness in my hands has definitely made it more difficult. So now the reason for the cutting mats is, of course, the rotary cutter. And generally when you have a cutting mat, you want to make sure you look for a self-healing mat. Olfa makes them, So Easy makes them, Unique makes a brand. They are very, very helpful. I mean, you can even get them at the dollar store. Oops. All right. So you can even get them at the dollar store. They are a little cheaper at the dollar store because you only get this little brick, and it's not the worst. It is a little thicker, so it seems like it should last longer, but it's actually just the same material, and it will break down at about the same rate as these slightly thinner but better mats. The Olfa one that I have here is a 24 by 18. I have one that is 11 by 17, and I have one that is 6 by 8. And they are super helpful, and I use this tool as the only rotary cutter that I have for all of them. So my rotary cutter I do not use on paper generally, and I don't use it to cut patterns. I usually use it to cut straight lines. Most of the time, I will be using a different ruler. So OmniGrid makes these. Olfa makes these. These rulers are super handy. They are a little thicker, so they end up lining up with your blade so that your blade doesn't end up cutting the ruler itself. Case in point, there are many rulers that you can get, but these ones, these little plastic cheapy rulers, they definitely don't do well with rotary blades. They end up getting cut up, chipped, cracked, all kinds of things, and that is just from me using my rotary cutter without proper rulers. So these cut the best for easy peasiness with straight. So if you have trouble with the scissors and you don't want to use an electrical pair, this is your next go-to. You just need your mat and a rotary cutter and then a blade. Now, the unique part of a rotary blade, unlike scissors, is that you can, of course, change out your blade. And generally speaking, it's fairly easy. You just pop out that little bit, you grab your blade, just lift it off. Mine is slightly ill-fitting as this is not the brand of Fisker's blades, but it is a Fisker rotary cutter. You can use different kinds in different kinds of blades in different kinds of cutters, but it's not really recommended. They are sized generally, but I can tell you right now that Fisker's definitely doesn't worry about different brands. They are good for everything. Now, this here is a scallop cut blade. These are more of the decorative types, so for quilters, crafters, scrapbookers, etc. These generally are just used to make pretty edges on fabrics that aren't going to be washed. Or if they are, they're going to be washed slightly more delicately. So with this one, it creates this. That little scallopy edge that you see is usually used on the edges of quilts and other things. And if you cut it again, you've got unique rickrack. In the case of some of the other kinds, there's the wave type, which looks like this, but has fewer of these discs. And of course, pinking cutting roller blades, which work just like these pinking shears. And they have significantly more edges than this scalloped one does. Oh, now you choose to be weird and magnetic. So there are other cutters like this skip cut cutter, skip cut rotary blade, I should say, that are significantly more decorative than they are useful. So a scallop cut blade at least could get you separated from the fabric, but the skip cut blade, as you can see, has these little holes in it, and they definitely won't let you cut through fabric in the same way. Tightened it too much. Yeah. See? But it did leave these tiny little holes that you can put a needle through, or a crochet hook, or any kind of thing, and you can add decorative yarn, you can add unique stitching, you can even make small patterns on pieces and then add them to your fabric later. This little skip cut blade comes in a variety of different kinds of sizes, so you can get these with much bigger separations between each of these little skips, and sometimes they even look very, very different, and these little holes here are big holes, and then the next blade would be like way over there. So there's lots of different varieties for lots of different uses. All right, guys, that's it. So be careful, because scissors and rotary blades are sharp. Make sure you always keep band-aids around, as well as if you ever want to get any of these pairs of scissors or anything like these, I have links down below in my description. If you like this video, please give it a like and a comment down below. And if you want to see more videos from me, please hit the subscribe button and the little bell icon in order to be notified every time I post a video. I post videos almost every week on Mondays before 9 p.m. and sometimes throughout the week. See you next time.